Hello and welcome to the Rover podcast. This week's guest is Georgie Robinson Ranger. She rode for UL. She's done all sorts of stuff with GB, UL, and she's just recently done the Wingfield Sculls. Um, and hopefully we'll sort of learn a little bit about the Wingfield Sculls today. Is there anything you can talk about there?
So Wingfield Sculls is very, very old. It's quite old. Um, and it was originally made as a race. It was kind of the championship of the Thames for the best, like back in the day, just the best men's sculler. Um, and the winner gets the a pair of silver sculling blades, that big. Um, and then they introduced women 2007, I think, off the top of my head. But yeah, basically it is a race from Putney to Chiswick Bridge. So the boat race course, six singles side by side, followed by coaches and launchers steering you with either flags or their hands going like this way, that way. Um, yeah, basically, and it's for elite scullers. It's invitational, so you put in your entry, and then they have to accept your entry, and they can reject it for whatever reasons they like. Um, yeah, so it's always some quite good racing, but it is a long race and a lot of side by side.
Yeah. So how is it that you sort of found out about it and got involved with it?
So I spent like the first half of last season, I spent quite a lot of time my single, and then my coaches suggested that I raced Wingfields
Mhm.
um, because one of them's raced it before. So Tom, my coach, raced it 3 or 4 times back in late 90s, early 2000s. And Smithy, my other coach, he has steered it an awful lot of times for like Mahay and kind of Alan Campbell and the Scullers old boys back in the day. Um, so yeah, they suggested I did it last year. I raced it last year, really enjoyed it. Decided to do it again this year, give it another shot.
Yeah, nice. And I guess so. The Wingfield Sculls is different from other events in that it's six scullers each year, and that's sort of the cap on that event. So what would you sort of say? How does that differ from other events in terms of other events? Obviously, you've got potentially hundreds of other people. Like, what was the sort of feeling and I guess the vibe having just like five other people to race against?
Um, it's certainly very different.
Mhm.
I mean, you race 6 lane 2K courses. I've done that before, but I think that the tideway itself is obviously very, very different from a lake, and it is 6.8K long,
Yeah.
and kind of there's your steering lines, and there's the best bit of water, and kind of you have to be really aware of everyone else's. There's no like void lanes; they don't shut the river, um, so it can be rather chaotic. Like last year, we had Katie Mole and Imogen Grant crashed in front of me, and I got caught in the crossfire. Fortunately, didn't have any of that in my edge of the race this year, but there was one on the other side with Jenny Bates and Laura Bates crashed right off the start. But it can be really chaotic, but it is really good fun.
Do you enjoy that chaos? Is that something that you'd like to see in other races potentially?
I think it's what makes Wingfields unique. I wouldn't say I'd necessarily like it for every single race. I think I'd probably get quite frustrated,
Yeah.
mainly at other people. But
Hmm.
I think you kind of get away with it at Wingfields because, like, as I said, you've got the coaches behind you steering you, and obviously
Yeah.
they're all competing for the best line, but they also don't want you to crash.
Yeah.
Um, so it's kind of it's all right. It makes it interesting.
Yeah. And I guess in terms of that sort of steering as well, so steering's a huge part of the tideway, isn't it? And obviously there's a stream in the middle and sort of all over the place in some places a river. Like, so how important would you say that is to getting a good position and getting in the race?
Oh, unbelievably. You can get like probably over 30 seconds comfortably if you're in the right bit of the river compared
Mhm.
to the edges. I mean, the thing is that normally when you race, depending what level you're racing at, people know like their rough steering lines. So the margins aren't quite, oh, they lost a minute and they lost this, but
Yeah.
it can definitely make up seconds along the way. I think that is really important. Like, I do think steering is really important. You've got to have steerers you trust that really know the tideway, which
Yeah.
is why you get people who are from clubs that don't necessarily spend a lot of time on tideway. Their coaches don't know the tideway too well. They get they kind of get themselves steerers from the local clubs.
Yeah.
So, for example, like there were no one from Thames was racing, but Zander, the Thames head coach, was steering someone, and Jamie Kirkwood, who's been in Tideway for ages, was steering Josh from Reading, who won the men's race.
Yeah.
So I think it is just an experience thing, but it's cool.
Yeah.
Makes it interesting.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And that steering again, like it was the boat race last year, wasn't it? Where a lot of people sort of said and almost said that it was Jasper Parish that sort of won that for Cambridge that year, just because they sort of took a different line. And I guess because it's 6 lanes across, obviously, someone's going to be at a disadvantage, kind of regardless. I guess how does that sort of work in that situation?
So you set off on your lines, and you are in theory supposed to, as you go down the race, overtake each other on like one side over the other and stuff like that. As in, like, I had Imogen to my left, and she was supposed to overtake me on my left if she, like, when we overtook later down the race. But realistically, is everyone separates out after the first few minutes, and then it's everyone gets on the line and sits on the line and doesn't really budge from it. It's not 6 side by side the whole way down.
Yeah. And would you say it's a bit aggressive to get into those lines? Is there like, do you think there are some crashes that are potentially set up, or is it very much like you try and stick and you try and stay away?
I don't think crashes are deliberately set up, but the thing with the tideway is it can kind of fling you around, and especially when you're in racing, you don't necessarily always think to be really aware of the person next to you. So your coach is saying, "Oh, well, you've got to go that way," and you're just blindly following that when actually there's someone right there that you're about to hit. And so you kind of have to be like, obviously crashing is not good for anyone, because it slows all of you down. So like I'd like to say we try not to. Like I know as we were coming around the Harrods corners, Imogen started to overtake me in our race. Like we were kind of, I'm taking the corner, Imogen, watch out. Kind of we worked off each other rather than just cutting each other off, and it just not really be very productive. And neither of us wanted to crash again after last year, to be honest. But
so what happened last year then?
There's a great photo of it somewhere. It was, so I was in the closest lane to Putney last year, and Imogen and Katie off the start. I got up off the start, and then they started to like overtake in the middle of the river a bit on the line. And then Imogen steered the line and Katie steered the line, and obviously it was in front of me. I didn't really see what was happening at the time, but they crashed trying to avoid one of the red boys, and then they got stuck like that on each other, and I was kind of coming towards them here, and I was like, so there's a great photo of me handbrake stopping to go round. There's a great few photos somewhere of the clash. It was a bit chaotic, and then kind of we got caught out the back from there, but it made it interesting.
But I guess over such a long race, that sort of thing, you probably can make up time for crashes and things like that. Do you think if there was a shorter race, that sort of would change and people sort of avoid that sort of thing more, or do you think that would make it more exciting?
I think if it was a shorter race, it would be, I think you'd stay side by side for longer. So I think the crashes probably would more likely come than not. But I do think you're absolutely right in that if you do crash, you can make up that lost time. So Jenny in our race crashed with Laura Bates off the start, and then she rode through to come 4th overall. From quite far dropped back in the pack. She kind of really caught back up to everyone. Like it is long enough that you can make some big gains, but you don't want to be you don't want to crash.
And you sort of mentioned there were a few good photos of the crash from last year. I saw a lot of stuff online about how this year the sort of media got really involved and there was a lot more sort of openness. What do you think you saw from that perspective?
Well, so I've chatted to a few of them. I know a few people in the rowing photo world. They all just seemed very happy that the organisers are so free with just being like, of course you can sit and launch and come and follow, because I do know that there are some other events that are a bit more exclusive,
Hmm.
almost kind of like don't always let them get as close as they like, or offer up so many media spots or whatever.
Yeah,
And I think it was really nice that they were just given the opportunity to just go, as long as you don't get in the way of racing, off you go.
yeah.
Um, which I do think was nice. It led to some very cool photos, and I think it was
Mm.
nice that they like could get as close as they wanted
Yeah.
within reason. But I do think that's good, and I do think that's something like the bigger races could maybe pick up on.
Hmm.
It does feel like sometimes it's like, oh, well, this one company's loud, but no one else.
Yeah.
Um,
And yeah, and
yeah,
the sort of shots from the water as well. I think that's really important because I don't know if you've watched sort of Head of the River live streams and things like that, and it's literally like filmed from was it Imperial this year, and they sort of just have to
yeah. They
set up their camera.
if this is the Allmark one live stream, yeah, they use the icy balcony because Lucinda, who does a lot of work with them, she like is from
Mm.
icy.
Yeah,
So they're pretty much always on the icy balcony. But the shots that you get from Riverside, and it's the same with like the race photos, you always find people at like Barnes Bridge and
mm.
on the water level, kind of like on the banks and stuff, are always just such better photos than
Yeah,
from like 100 meters off the water,
mm.
high above.
Yeah. Um, and I guess going forwards, it's like obvious that they've sort of got the facilities to do that sort of thing from, I guess, like Henley and that sort of stuff. Do you think that's something like if Wingfield Sculls, they could definitely turn that into some like a better sort of televised event almost? Do you think that that could be something that would be interesting to watch?
Um, I do think it could be interesting to watch. I do think Wingfields is more interesting to watch than just watching standard head races go past.
Hmm.
It's generally got a lot more carnage,
Yeah,
from my own experience. Uh, but yeah, I do think that a proper live stream would be really cool. I know we had Sam Mayer on the Instagram live, but he was
yeah,
also running timing off people running along with flags on the bank and like numerous other things. And it's really difficult to get a really stable shot when you're on an iPhone bouncing on the tideway.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, I think it would be cool. I think it'd be nice. I think it make it a bit more of a well-known event. Like it doesn't
yeah.
seem to be very like I think I vaguely remember Charlotte Hodgkins Byrne racing it for UL probably 4 years ago.
Mhm.
But that's the first time I'd ever even heard of it.
Yeah, and it
Um,
is like it's a very prestigious event, I'd say. Like
mm,
it's like got a lot of history and it's invitational, as we sort of spoke about earlier. And it's like I think for something like that, and I didn't really hear about it until I sort of came to uni and things like that. It's like it definitely could be made into a bigger event. And it's like I think there's
yeah,
sort of one of those things where they've made it too exclusive to the point where it's actually hard to find out about. And so when I was looking it up earlier, it's sort of it's hard. Like you actually have to sort of go quite deep to look for stuff about it. Um, and yeah, I think there's some changes that could probably be made in that area. Yeah.
yeah. I do think that it's not necessarily the most publicized
Mm.
event. I think it is something that kind of you know about if you're in the sculling sphere or like on the tideway, you seem to know about it. But
Mhm.
outside of that, not many people have heard of it before. And it is a cool race. Like it is really good to watch. And obviously, you get entrants that are Olympic champions. So it's been Mahe before, Alan Campbell before, Imogen, who obviously is a phenomenal sculler.
Mhm.
She's raced it twice now. Like there always are some very good entries, and it is I think it is a good opportunity to watch some really good proper long distance racing.
Yeah. And you yourself, you've had a very successful rowing career so far. What sort of events have you done that are sort of cool events? What are the cool events that you've done, I guess? Like,
Cool events. Um, so kind of my bucket list events. One of them was racing a single at Henley,
mhm.
which I did this year, which was really cool to be honest.
Yeah.
That was my first time racing the elite, like the non-student or the junior events.
Mhm.
Um, so that was pretty cool. I really enjoyed the races there and the standard of like the races, like the entries were great. Like we had Olympic medalists and whatever. That was really cool. Another one was the Windermere Cup, which I went to in 2021.
Yeah.
No, 22. 22 in the GB Dev 8. That was cool. That was a very different event.
Yeah.
That was
That's
yeah,
Washington, isn't it?
yeah, in Washington.
Yeah.
That was cool. I think also just like your standard set of races. Like, I really enjoy racing the eights at Henley. I've really enjoyed. I do like Henley. It's very
Yeah.
special to me. Like Henley Women's, Henley Royal. I get to go home. I get to have some fun. It's great. Like always will be very cool. But yeah, I think probably Wingfields and the Windermere Cup are probably like the most exclusive ones I've been to, and they've always been pretty cool.
Yeah. And what do you think it is about Henley and events like that that make it so special?
I mean, personally, like I grew up on the Henley course. I learned to row there. I have been watching Henley Regatta since I was about 2.
Yeah.
School used to give us the Friday off school to go and watch it, kind of thing. Nice. So that's always special to me. But I do think it's a bit different. It's what makes it so exciting. And like it is, I think the reason it's such a publicly known event is it is a social event on top of being a like your standard regatta.
Yeah.
It's side by side, it's knockout. It's just a bit more exciting than watching 6 lanes.
And it's very unique as well in that, isn't it? There's not many side by side racing. There's sort of that, and then the boat race that's
yeah.
That
the boat race, and then I guess the Windermere Cup's 3 abreast, but like it's all pretty ruthless racing.
Yeah,
I think that just makes it a bit more exciting to watch.
Yeah. Do you think there should be more events like that, or do you think the exclusivity is what makes it cool and exciting?
I don't know where they'd fit in the racing calendar. I do like that there are these like traditional exclusive events. I think that they are very cool and they are a very good display of like the top end of racing. And like obviously they don't offer more categories. Like the Windermere Cup is a regatta in itself, but then it has the Windermere Cup races, which are men's eights, women's eights, and that's it. And then you have like the Wingfields is just singles, and Henley obviously has so many different categories, but it's not open to everything. Like there aren't like that's not like band A, band B, band C, band D, whatever. It's just the top end of your event. That is it. I quite like that. I think it's cool. I think like it's nice that there are those like it's really public displays of like this is the top end of racing, because I do think there are lots of other events that kind of have the inclusivity and the wider range of events on offer that are available. But I do think it's nice that there's like those like the pinnacle events are generally like the best in the country or the world. And I think that's quite cool.
Yeah. And I guess sort of on that, do you think there is room for sort of a separation of events like that? So you have sort of the sort of top end events, and then could you create some sort of overlap, or do you think that could sort of make other events redundant? So say, I know there's sort of quite a few regattas in the summer where some clubs will go off to like Europe and things like that instead of going to those events, sort of chasing competition. Do you think there's room to make more domestic races alongside the sort of less exclusive events?
I don't. Obviously, races take a lot of planning, and most of the races in the racing calendar go up and down in popularity over the years and whatever. Like Met is really, really popular. Marlowe's generally quite popular in summer. Brit Champs used to be, back when they used to run it in October, used to be like fairly popular. And they obviously offer everything from like well, not masters, all of them, but kind of senior racing all the way down to juniors and stuff like that. And I think that is really important as well. I do think there should be lots of racing opportunities where you do mix, like you could be racing a J15 single, and then the next race is like men's championship eights, and you go like the complete different spectrum. And I think that's cool. I think it's nice when you have the mix of all of it. It's why I like events like men's, which whilst yes, it doesn't have men in it, but from the you have everything from like J16 fours to like senior women's championship events. And I think that's quite important as well, because it is nice to like have something for everyone. at
Yeah.
what is like generally considered a fairly high ranked event in the year.
Mm. And just
But
sort of the
yeah,
opportunity to give people
yeah,
racing. Yeah.
the opportunity for racing, but I also do think that there is something very magical in like the small little regattas
Yeah,
that
definitely.
you don't always get the highest. Like you won't find the championship clubs and unis and whatever racing those.
Hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, it's like there are a wide range of races. I don't think there's really that much scope in the racing calendar to keep battering with entries.
Mm.
Like because you would just lose entries. Like if you had
Yeah.
5 regattas on one weekend, you wouldn't have anyone racing them because they'd everyone be spread
Mhm.
out. So
Yeah.
you know,
And
it's
I
a
guess
challenge.
there's obviously you've raced at Bucks with UL. Bucks is a bit of a strange event in a way that the championship events are usually pretty undersubscribed in that I know when I've raced it before, it's usually been either a straight final or there's been like one semi and then straight to the final, whereas you get intermediate and you'll get sort of 60 entries and then there are loads of entries in the novice as well. Do you think that's something that could be promoted in other events potentially? And then I guess sort of you get that exclusivity within the same event in a way.
I do think having intermediate and novice category is really important because obviously racing at all
Mhm.
levels of rowing. So Henley Women's now what they called the aspirational events that
Yeah.
used to be the intermediate events and the novice events that like they do have novice, and I think that's really important. Um, but I guess it's kind of the same as having your standard regatta based on the ranking points, and you have like your band A, B, C, and you can get
Mhm.
medals for all of the bands of racing. I think it's similar in that way because then you can win a category even though you're racing alongside. So is this they normally like Met, for example, race all the categories together and then it's just the highest rank to get the medal.
Yeah.
I think that's quite cool. But
Mhm.
I guess Bucks is quite individual in the way it runs. But I
Mhm.
do think that is just because it's only got unis. So it
Yeah.
does have the opportunity to like fit all of that into the racing calendar
Mhm.
rather than trying to also accommodate for all of the hundreds of clubs across the country that also want to
'Cause-
race.
yeah, because that overlaps with I think it's Wallingford Regatta, or it did this year. Um,
Yeah.
and that definitely means that Wallingford Regatta probably takes a pretty big hit in terms of entries. Um, but in terms of sort of making events like the Wingfield Sculls sort of a big media event potentially, and sort of Henley getting it all on YouTube and with commentary and people following, do you think there's room to sort of allocate more attention to the higher events, or do you think the sort of media and live streaming commentary should be spread out across all of the events equally?
Um, so I don't know. I feel like I might be a bit different in this, but I only end up really going and watching the live stream of things like Henley,
Yeah.
um, mainly because I just stick it on in the house. But
Hmm.
if I want to go back and watch a race, I can, and that's really cool. But obviously, Nat schools have been live streaming for the last few years, and I'll occasionally go and watch like the Champ 8s races there and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think it's nice, like as an athlete, to be able to go back and watch your own race.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think that it's not as easy as just like, oh, cool, we'll just live stream everything to a really high standard because
Hmm.
obviously it costs an awful lot of money.
Yeah.
And so for these smaller events, so like the Wingfields is completely run by volunteers who are ex winners. Like
Hmm.
the whole committee is just ex champions.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of money and effort and planning to put on the live stream.
Hmm.
So I do think that it takes a bit more, yeah, than just being like, oh, I'll just live stream everything.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think like we are getting to an age like, and I'm glad rowing's catching up to other sports, but a lot of other sports are televised, and I think that's really cool. And it is opening up the accessibility of like other people to just watch what's happening in the sport. Whether they find it interesting to watch or not is a very different thing. But I
Yeah.
do think like having it out there is a good start to kind of making it a more like it's a well-known sport, but I don't think it's the most widely watched sport in the world.
Yeah.
So I do think having like high quality live stream and commentary would help that. But yeah, it does take a bit more effort than I think we realize.
Yeah. And I think it is something a guy used to joke about all the time. It's you have to spend money to make money in a way. So it's if you sort of invest in the live streams and the commentary and things like that, that's when you could start getting sponsorships and things like that coming in. And I guess from races like the Wingfields, that seems like a perfect opportunity where you could say, we have 6 athletes here, like we only need sort of 6 sponsors. That'd be sort of a perfect opportunity to do something like that. Do you think that's something that should like people should putting more effort into?
I don't know. I feel like sponsorship and rowing is quite. It has to be watched to then go and.
Mm-hmm.
I think it goes the opposite way, and that it's not like, oh, we've got sponsors, and then therefore it's paid, and therefore it's televised, and then it's like it's more accessible. I think is actually that sponsors won't be interested until
Yeah,
it's a massive deal and they know that people are going to watch it and it's worth the investment from their side as a business decision.
yeah,
Like obviously the boat races have massive investors every year
yeah,
that help the programs and help the running of it, but it is it is the most watched race in probably the rowing world,
yeah.
I guess must be.
Mm-hmm.
But it is like a massive occasion, like especially in London, you get to see people like lining the banks and going to all the pubs, and it's like it is a big deal, and therefore the
Mm-hmm.
sponsors like, of course we'll make this a big deal. It goes on BBC, like
Yeah,
that's great. But I do think that maybe just having like a YouTube channel, I don't think it's necessarily like, always the best reason, like enough for an investor, you
mm-hmm.
know.
I having sort of done a fair bit of research for my degree as well,
Mm-hmm.
it can be quite frustrating when you see pages such as like Brooks and UL that have like tens of thousands of like followers and subscribers and things like that, and it's sort of that's a pretty wide range audience, and it does seem like there's a bit of opportunity that's been missed there. Do you think that's something that clubs with sort of high volumes of followers and subscribers should be standing up and saying, okay, we'll take on sponsorships or we'll take on sort of promotional things to sort of get the sport out?
I don't know. I feel like it could be an interesting way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that a lot of the followers on pretty much every uni club, whatever
Mm-hmm.
Instagram account are generally just rowers.
Yeah.
So they already kind of know about the sport and they already kind of know what's going on. And generally, the followers of those accounts, like the mass followings, whatever, are just there'll be juniors that are really keen on. There'll be parents of children that have just started. There'll be people that have been in the sport for ages, whatever, being like, I'm going to keep tabs on my old club. I'm going to keep tabs on
Yeah.
like potential uni clubs, whatever. I think unis obviously mainly use it for recruitment.
Mm-hmm.
I think obviously like a good social media presence is phenomenal for recruitment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's like really integral into the whole like pulling in more talent for more red boxes, more results, whatever.
Yeah.
I do think it could be used as like a sponsorship opportunity, but I guess you'd really have to find a company that's really invested in rowing.
Yeah.
Like I know, for example, like Leander have got Invesco and
Mm.
or not Invesco anymore. Who is it?
I there is definitely a sponsor. um,
They've got a sponsor.
yeah.
They're American or Kiwi. Anyway, Leander have a sponsor that
Mm.
help fund Leander rowing and make things really cheap for their athletes and stuff like
Mm.
that. But I don't think many other clubs have that. Like I know there's one-off sponsors here and there, and like boat manufacturers will sponsor athletes individually. Like Hudson have the Shark Team or whatever they're called,
Mm.
and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it could be an avenue for like more funding for clubs and kind of to get the sport out there more. But I don't think that's necessarily what clubs are looking to use it for at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. Um, and then with that in mind, again, do you think that's something that individual athletes could look into?
Um, I guess so. And there are obviously there are a few athletes far in between that are sponsored by individual people.
Mm.
So like the boat companies and obviously the GB senior team have got all of their like the dry rope sponsors and
Yeah.
everyone else that sponsors and gives them lots of really nice stuff that you see on the Instagram. I do think individually it could be a thing, but I think it depends where it's coming from,
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of thing. Like it's rare to see one athlete individually sponsored by a company.
Mhm.
I don't think that's something that you really see in rowing. Obviously, you get in loads of other sports, but I just don't think it's something in rowing. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know how you'd go about doing it, to be honest.
And then in terms of sort of promoting the sport again, do you think that could be put down to individual athletes? So you get people like sort of Cam Buchan, they'll go out, and I think he's probably done a pretty good job in terms of getting more people invested in the sport. And I don't know how many sort of subscribers or whatever it is that he's got on YouTube now, but he's definitely sort of done his part in sort of promoting the sport. Do you think there are more people that could be doing that and sort of investing a bit of time into promoting the sport?
I think absolutely. I think it just depends how you go about reaching people. Like I know
Mm.
some of the GB seniors occasionally go into schools and they'll kind of have talk about rowing and
Yeah.
whatever. And it's fairly often you'll see in school someone will get in to open up a new sports hall. They'll get in a high level athlete. Like my school
Yeah.
got in Catherine Granger once upon a time.
Mhm.
And people are, oh, rowing, that's a thing. And I was like, yes, rowing is a thing. Um, but yeah, I feel like it is something people could be not necessarily like more vocal about, but more kind of rowing is like this is how you get into rowing,
Mm.
rather than I'm at this elite end of rowing and I'm amazing.
Yeah.
I think it like showing how people get into it and how they can just enjoy it and they don't necessarily need to be giving up 4.5 hours of their day every single day
Mm.
to do it.
Yeah.
And I do think British rowing are getting a lot better at doing that. I think having the whole this is how you get started in rowing. These are the kind of learn to erg guides for people that want to get into indoor rowing and kind of like this is where to find a club and this is like this learn to row program and this learn to row program and people like Fulham Reach doing loads of outreach with schools. I think it's really
Mhm.
important. And just like offering the opportunity for people to get into rowing because it
Yeah.
kind of is seen as this kind of exclusive elitist sport that is kind of inaccessible. Like it is an expensive sport. That's not a secret of rowing. But I think people like Fulham Reach that are doing such amazing outreach and making it like making it accessible is really important. And I think
Mhm.
like the more accessible you can make the sport, the more people who get in and the more the sport's like promoted as an option.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's some really good points. um, uh, and then sort of in terms of so something I spoke with a guy that I had on a couple of weeks ago. He was basically saying he was not a rower per se, but he'd done some sort of rowing stuff before. He was basically saying he'd like the opportunity to just sort of get a really cheap boat and basically take it down to the river and go rowing. And something I saw fairly recently was basically it was I'm not 100% sure how it sort of was designed, but it was essentially a paddle board that had a rigger put on top and then a sliding seat. Do you
Yeah.
think that sort of thing is a step in the right direction to sort of making rowing more accessible, or do you think it's sort of
Um,
not really relevant enough?
I feel like as with any new sport, it's not quite like the same as football where you can just buy football and get into it. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like there are some sports that are much easier to get into than others. But I do think that rowing, like, yes, the equipment's expensive as a one-off. So I actually think that instead of people buying their paddleboard and the paddleboard attachment for, I've seen it, it's entertaining. But I do think it's good. Like any form of rowing is better than no form of rowing. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it more has to come from the clubs. Like
Hmm.
there are lots and lots of clubs that have learn to row programs. They have adult learn to row, they have junior learn to row, they have summer camps, stuff like that. And I think they're really important for getting people into sport, like
Hmm.
into rowing, because they have the facilities, they have the equipment, and then it's kind of like, oh, off you go, because it's not so easy as buying a single and being like, I'm going to go
Yeah.
teach myself to row, as I've learned with all of my J15s. I'm trying to teach to row properly at the moment. Um, it's not as easy as just like being like, off you go.
Yeah.
Um, I do think it has to kind of be someone that knows what they're doing initially.
Hmm.
Apart from erging, I do think that you can pick up erging fairly easily.
Hmm.
And then people seem to go from that to, oh, maybe I'll give it in a boat to try and like sign up for a club.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I do think stuff like the paddleboard thing and even the like virtual rowing hydro or whatever it's called at the moment
Yeah.
is a
Was
good
it
way to like,
EXR as well? They've sort of got a
yeah,
Strava sort of thing going on.
yeah,
Strava, Zwift, is it? Yeah.
Zwift, that's the
Yeah.
one. Like these things that introduce like the ideas of rowing and and whatever is any avenues to start rowing, I think is really important. But yeah, I don't think it's as easy as I'm going to buy myself a boat and teach myself to row.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. And I guess I'll finish off how I finish off my last podcast. What do you have any good stories that you fancy telling about the sport?
Oof. Funny stories of me rowing. I don't have any hugely dramatic ones. I've got a great video somewhere of me at Caversham about a week before we flew out to the World Champs in my fresh year. In my single, we're doing racing starts, and I just let go of my blade at the start of one of them, kind of like 3 strokes in, and just completely flip in while the men's quad were paddling past. That was quite funny. I don't think I've got any like massively dramatic stories in rowing. Nothing major so far.
Yeah. Well,
nothing major. I'm like, wow, that was a
probably a
big
good
mess
thing.
up.
Yeah, probably a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so far, I haven't had any massive altercations in my boat yet.
Well, congratulations on your second place at Wingfield Sculls, and
Thanks.
I hope the rest of your road career is as successful as it has been in the past. Thanks
Thanks
very much for coming on.
It's all right. Thanks.